Let's talk about this this Epstein thing. So first, let me ask you, what do you make of the MAGA media civil war? You see people like Alex Jones and people like Nick Fuentes being, somewhat, I wouldn't say fully aggressive, but critical.
Alex Jones is going through some things.
Oh my God, I'm gonna puke. I'm gonna puke. I can't believe he's losing his mind over there. But then you got, like Nick Fuentes is just flat out screaming at Trump now. But then you also have Ben Shapiro on the other side defending Trump. You have Tim Pool, who's out there saying, Rokan is trying to release the Epstein files, and that means he's trying to release child pornography. Like, that's the Democrats want to release child porn. That's why they're doing it. And so there's all this coping and seething. What do you make of the MAGA media civil war?
I think the MAGA media in general reminds me a lot of WWE, or for our generation, WWF media. It's tethered to a make-believe cosplay fascist world where they create all of these fictions and stories and Dungeons and Dragons, right, around their dear cult leader. That's just not tethered to reality. So they're fighting proxy wars against each other. And at the end of the day, these wars are still kind of untethered to reality, and they're jockeying for positions, in this MAGA space, which is often also kind of very lucrative when you get closer to Mar-A-Lago and you can really kind of perpetuate, that grift. I think the struggle that some of them are finally having, though, is when Donald Trump is saying, look, I don't want you. If you don't believe that Epstein is a hoax and that it was all made up by Comey, Obama, and Clinton, you are a stupid person and I want you out. And I think that there's a little bit of a struggle and a tension there, because a lot of people who are in cults don't want to look stupid and humiliated to their family members and others. And that's why sometimes they get more entrenched within the kind of cult and to the cult leader itself. So I think what you're going to see happening is you're going to see parts of the cult solidify even more. And it's going to just look, if that's even possible, and then you're going to have some vocal voices kind of get excommunicated like we saw in the first time, and now all of a sudden these are, people who are viewed as, oh, these are Trump haters and deep staters and whatever. And where I just want to always bring things back to, though, in the Epstein discussion, is that this is a real serious issue and not a hypothetical. Jeffrey Epstein ran a sex trafficking ring with elite billionaire men where they brought very young little girls and engaged in the most heinous acts imaginable. And there's a group of billionaire men. This isn't like some conspiracy. It is real. It happened. And Jeffrey Epstein was convicted, and Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted of this. And you go through the files that have been released thus far. If the complete pie has 100% of files that have been, that are out there, 10% have been released thus far in the various civil, criminal cases. And if you go through the files that have been released, the small amount of flight logs, the small amount of the black book, the small amount of the call logs, the small amount of the depositions, and you were to run that through an AI and a chat GPT and say which wealthy man was with Epstein the most, you're probably going to find out it's Donald Trump very, very frequently. And here's the thing, too. Mar-A-Lago was used as a crime scene where the sex trafficking took place. And it's not like, oh, you got to be careful what you say. It's out there. And this isn't, again, going down a rabbit hole. Virginia Giuffre, underage girl, was homeless. She got a job at Mar-A-Lago as the towel girl at the spa at Mar-A-Lago. And then destitute young girl working as towel girl in the spa. Then Ghislaine Maxwell, who was right down the block, because she and Jeffrey Epstein were best friends with Trump. They'd walk over to Mar-A-Lago. They would see a young girl that Epstein might like. Oh, you're the towel girl at Mar-A-Lago? You want to meet my really rich friend, Jeffrey Epstein, and he'll take you across the world. So they bring Virginia Giuffre over, and then Epstein sex traffics her. That was the MO. So lots of people show the video, of Donald Trump and Epstein, and Trump looking like that face of his is some of the most like disgusting looking face that that you see. But what they were doing there is to me more important than the visual. So yes, the MAGA civil war amongst the media, to me, it's amusing, but I always want to bring the audience back to this is real and this is serious. And now Trump is saying that a sex trafficking ring is a hoax, and he stopped the investigation into the co-conspirators.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing that is so crazy to me is like, this was all out there. Like, we covered it. And the person who was most potentially implicated, sure, Bill Clinton, yes, and I'm happy to have anything bad exposed about him too. Let's do it, right? Or Bill Gates or whoever. But the person who was most closely linked to Epstein in a position of power now is Donald Trump. And, you know, before the election, those audio recordings from Michael Wolff came out where Epstein would say, hey, we were besties for a decade and here's what we did together.
That story was buried.
Yeah, you barely heard anything about it. And it just speaks to the level of like delusion that MAGA world is able to engage in, that this was all staring them in the face and they never saw it. They thought he was going to be the one to expose all the criminals and like the elite sex pedophile ring. They thought that the guy who was best friends with Jeffrey Epstein for a decade, that he would be the one to do it. And even when Trump would get asked about this, he would get very squirrely, right? He would be like, you know, in that now infamous Fox News interview that they edited to make it sound like when he gets asked about Epstein, he's like, yeah, I'll release the files. He goes, yeah, well, maybe less so with that one. And then goes on to a lot of phony stuff and privacy, blah, blah, blah. So it's just, it's extraordinary to me, the level of delusion that they were able to engage in to think that he wouldn't be implicated in any way.
Yeah, in psychology, cognitive dissonance and projecting the worst qualities of your cult leader onto the other. And, you know, it is what, you know, you take a look at North Korea, for example, right? What does North Korea say about South Korea, usually? Not to say that South Korea is a perfect place or any place, but all of the things that Kim Jong-un is doing to his people and torturing his people, they'll say, look, that's what's going on in South Korea. That's what the red states do to the blue states. Right? You know, I mean, the red states would be failed states without the blue states. I mean, you know, they hate California, but California contributes $80 billion more to the federal government than it takes in, where a state like Texas takes in $50 billion more than it gives to the federal government. So quite literally, the blue states subsidize the red states, but the prevailing narratives out there has no bearing to the reality that 75% of the United States economy is made up of what blue states are doing. So I mention that not to get sidetracked, because I think we need to be focusing on the Epstein, but it goes back to what you started, which is, why do you think the Meidas Touch Network is breaking out, you know, in this media environment? Because I'm just trying to cut through. I don't like politics, and my wife sometimes goes, yes, you do. You run a political media network. Of course you love politics. But I go, I really don't. I don't like politicians. I think if you believe that one politician's going to fix things, they're always going to let you down eventually. You know, I'm not like rooting for a specific which Democrat. I hate when I get the question, what Democrat do you really like out there right now and you think is going to win? I don't know. The one who fights for the people the best and actually delivers on their promises would be the best. But I think I think that we have to cut through all of the BS and get down to the truth. And the truth here is that Donald Trump is intimately involved. And I always tell people too, you know how I can show you that there's a list? I could prove to you there's a list very, very easily. And they go, how? I go, Trump's Doe 174. You know, what do you mean? I said, in the civil cases, he's Doe 174. So that means there's Doe 173 and there's Doe 175. And that means there's Doe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It doesn't just start at Doe 174. So now you could say, well, what's that list? It was the people who were around Epstein whose names had to be given Does, because if you knew the data about them, it could potentially harm them, so that their names are under seal in the court filings. But I would tell you, I would know exactly where to go to get the Trump portion of the Epstein ordeal. In Ghislaine Maxwell's federal criminal sex trafficking case, there was a woman who was 14 years old at the time, said that Ghislaine and Jeffrey Epstein introduced her to Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. She went by Jane Doe at the trial. I want to see her grand jury testimony. I want to see all of the witness statements related to her. I want to see the Doe 174 witness file. Anything referencing Trump, who's given the designation Doe 174, I want to see. I want to see all of the, communications, emails, anything referencing, Trump's name. We know that stuff's out there. So if Trump also selectively released certain documents and not others, I think why he just wants to shut it down, totally. And the way they shut it down, though, is just, beyond, it's like, what? Like, that's what you're doing? You're saying it doesn't exist, but now it's created by Obama, Clinton, and Comey? That doesn't make any sense. Oh, and then they fire Maureen Comey, Comey's daughter, who's the federal prosecutor of the Ghislaine Maxwell. They fire her right away. But I would know exactly where to look. So this isn't some hypothetical thing. And I think where we have to be, not careful, but, the media always wants to gamify, these issues, blue team, red team, this team, that team. And then, you watch a show where they have like people just yelling at each other. And then it's like, okay. And you're not really left with what's the truth. And the truth is there was a serious sex trafficking ring that exploited young girls and destroyed their lives for the rest of their lives. And Trump was involved, and we deserve answers.
So now I'll give you the new poll numbers that we just got. Crystal and I were just talking about this in the intro here. So prior to this Epstein fiasco, with Trump coming out like 4 or 5 times and tattooing guilty on his forehead as he tries to sweep it under the rug, prior to this, his support with the MAGA base, like MAGA Republicans, 86% was the support. Okay, that was the CNN poll. The Quinnipiac poll had him at 87% prior to this. Since this scandal, he's now gone up 2 points in the CNN poll to 88%, and he's gone up 3 percentage points in the Quinnipiac poll to 90%. Make sense of that for me, because that, to me, is a level of, I don't even know what to call it, commitment to one man over anything else that I can't even wrap my mind around. That you're willing to say, I don't care that these girls were sex trafficked and Trump is implicated and he's clearly trying to hide that. Because what? How do you get yourself to this place? Make sense of that for me.
Well, I think at some point that number will probably look more like 98%. And we may go, oh my gosh, 98%. Well, 98% of what, though? If the base is a rapidly shrinking base of people who are now willing to believe that James Comey, Clinton, and Obama created the Epstein files in order to frame their dear leader, Donald Trump, if you're willing to believe that, you'll probably believe that actually the Democrats are Martians from a secret alien species that is going to, turn every volleyball player into a trans athlete or something. Like you'll buy anything. You'll buy anything at some point. So to me, the question really isn't what's the MAGA base and Republican support, because it actually doesn't surprise me that that number keeps going up and up and up as he gets more deranged. The question, and the bigger question, though, and I think it's one we find out in the midterms, is what does that base look like? Most Americans right now consider themselves independents, and the independent base is growing more than anybody. And the bigger challenge, I think, for all of us in elections that, whether we like it or not, will probably be always closely decided, is how do we not normalize this fascist conduct out there so that these independents who may not be watching our YouTube channels every day or getting the news through by watching what's going on in the House and the Senate and forming opinions, if they just turned on their local news like you did during the election and you didn't know any of this, you thought Donald Trump was a normal candidate who was just focused on affordability, because the way local media would cut all of his clips where he would be, I showed a clip this morning in one of my videos when Donald Trump was in Iowa speaking at a high school. He said that he doesn't like when hookers pee on him. He said, lots of people say I like golden showers. I go back and you can pull the video so you can be like, come on, Ben, you're making this up. He said that at a campaign stop in Iowa at a Iowa high school. My wife, that would gross me out. But the local media coverage will not say, well, that's a pretty strict. Could you imagine if Obama, I just want to let you all know that,
oh my God.
It would be the big, it would, but if you watch the local news, they just cut Donald Trump saying, and that's why we're going to make America great and things are going to be cheaper. And they replay that over and over and over and over again. So we just have to make sure that his behavior is, and behavior like that is not normalized and appeal to the independents and people who really want normalcy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the sane washing, what you're describing.
Oh, I mean, and the double standard, it's such a cliche at this point to be like, imagine if Biden or Obama or Kamala had said X or Y or Z, and it's like, the double standard is just absolutely insane with this guy, the things that he can say and do that like barely even register. One of the things that I think is going on right now too is, and you see some of the right-wing influencers grappling with this in real time, is basically they're being offered this deal of like, well, yeah, he's covering up an elite sex crimes, pedophile ring that he's probably implicated in, but you're going to get, some landscapers thrown into CCOT or thrown into Alligator Alcatraz. So the deal that's being offered to the base is basically like, well, you'll get your fascism and you'll get to see this like horrific cruelty on display, and you're just going to have to suck it up where, bombing Iran is concerned, or where Epstein is concerned, or on other issues, or on cutting Medicaid in service of the rich is concerned. You're just going to have to deal with those things. And what we're offering you in return is a demonstration of fascist cruelty.
Yeah. Look, he's a bad guy. I mean, the argument, right? He's a bad guy. We know that he's a bad guy, but he's our bad guy. So don't you like to see the libs be owned? Don't you like to see how they get really upset, and which is basically their platform, when you throw people into concentration camps and you disappear? Don't you want to see more of that? Just think, we're on our way. Look, we're raiding the farms in California. We're putting military on the streets. Come on, this is what you all wanted. This is what you all wanted to see. And going back to my point, I do think that whatever that portion is, there's that 35% of America, 30% of America that identifies as MAGA, where truly cruelty is the point, and their happiness is derived from the suffering of the other in this very strange, cult-like mentality. I think for the rest of the country, the issue of being able to live and a life that's rewarding, that's meaningful, and where you feel dignity, and you are received with dignity is most important. And I think in general, and I think what you both do an incredible job with, on your program also, though, is you're not swayed by all these narratives to try to say, ooh, maybe we need to moderate our position and be more like Republicans because that's working, or maybe we need to be more like that. It's like, no, you've always been on the side of workers and fighting for people, not because it's trendy, but because it's the right thing to do. And I remember, in my representation of Colin Kaepernick, there was a moment where nobody wanted to talk to us ever. Like, we wouldn't have picked up the phone. Then everybody wanted to talk to us, and everybody wanted to do a deal, and then nobody wanted to talk to us. And then there'll be a time when people will want to talk to us and do deals again and do whatever. And it's like that fair weather crap is what's captured us in this cycle of derangement and not getting things done. And it's just important that we all, and you've led the way on it, and I'm motivated by the work that you all have done, just to never be kind of swayed and pulled into that, and just be like, look, these are bad people, these are bad guys. But then you'll see, like I'm doing now, every Epstein discussion, I want to pivot into why this is always important, though, for the people at the end of the day also, because this is yet another example of Trump trying to take populism in a way. You got to support me. We're in this together to cover up for billionaires engaged in a sex trafficking ring.
Right.
Right. Hey, guys, we had the pleasure of talking to the podcast that dethroned Joe Rogan as #1 in the country. I'm, of course, talking about Meidas Touch. We spoke to Ben, who's the leader over there at the Meidas Touch Network. We had a really awesome conversation. If you want to see the whole thing, sign up below on Substack. You're not going to want to miss it.